Hey there, welcome to XR Industry Leaders with ArborXR. My name is Brad Scoggin, and I am the CEO and one of 3 co-founders of ArborXR. And we've had the opportunity of working with thousands of companies since 2016, and we've learned a ton about what it takes for XR to be successful in your organization.
And I'm Will Stackable, co-founder and CMO. This podcast is all about interviewing the leaders who are on the ground making XR happen today. True pioneers in the space, from Amazon, Walmart, and UPS to Coke, Pfizer, and beyond, to uncover the pitfalls, lessons learned, and secrets that you can use to help grow XR in your organization.
All right, well, today we get to talk to a couple of people from St. James Place. Today we have Josh Ellick, who is the Immersive Technology Manager, and Hannah Frame, who is the Social Learning Tech and Innovation Manager. Great to have you both on the show today.
Thanks for having us. Super excited to be here.
Yeah, it's great that we've finally got everything working.
Yes, we have had some technical difficulties, but we made it. We got through. Before we jump in, we always love to hear a little bit about your personal backgrounds, but ahead of that this time, because we do have an international audience, some people may be familiar with St. James Place, but I'm sure a chunk aren't. So maybe just tell us a little bit about SJP for the listeners who are not familiar with what you all do.
Yeah, absolutely. So SJP are a FTSE 100 company. So for those of you that are not familiar with what FTSE 100 means, it's a share index of the 100 companies listed on the London Stock Exchange. So essentially, SJP provide face-to-face financial advice delivered exclusively by our qualified expert advisors who make up our partnership. And we have over 4,000 advisors. And we founded in 1992, so we've been around for a few years. And we've got just under £160 billion of client funds under management. So pretty big, I'd say.
Yeah, that's awesome, and that was a perfect elevator pitch. I like that. I should do a better job when I talk about Arbor. Well, let's go to your background a little bit. So, Josh, I know that you started out as a digital engagement analyst before this, and Hannah, you started out as an intern. So maybe each of you share just a little bit about kind of where you started before this and how you got to your current roles.
Yeah, I basically joined as a VR digital engagement analyst when I first joined at SJP, and that was about sort of 18 months ago. I essentially at that time just started on the operational side of things, so really sort of supporting how do we take the experiences that we've created so far in VR, and it was just sort of one experience that we had at the time, and how do we make sure we're getting that delivered to the whole business, and just really kind of bringing the delivery of that content to life. Must have done a half decent job at that, because I then ended up getting extended quite a few times to sort of keep supporting with that, but then ultimately starting to look at how we can then scale this out, not just to the initial group that we were using and delivering this training to, which was within our academy, but then also then branching it out to other pockets in the business, and really trying to expand the reach of VR as a whole. And that sort of then led me on to taking on more and more projects, managing them, and just recently in the last sort of 4 or 5 months, got promoted to Immersive Technology Manager. And so, just managing more of our sort of VR strategy across all of our sort of like projects and sort of within our learning offering.
One quick follow-up before you go. I guess, and you can answer this as well, Hannah, but even before this position, Josh, if you came in as a VR digital engagement analyst just to start with, I guess, did you mean VR background before this, or just passionate about VR?
Absolutely no VR background whatsoever. So I was in recruitment before this, and I guess I started off there doing a bit of like tech recruitment, so recruiting for more like technical roles. And I am a bit of a nerd. I do like my tech, but I hadn't ever touched a VR headset before. So I guess for me, it was kind of when I saw this job come available, it seemed to have a really nice blend of being very sort of people orientated still, because ultimately we got to try and showcase VR as a solution to our whole, the whole business. But then there's also still being able to like play around with loads of tech and occasionally ordering a new VR headset and give that a play around. So yeah, I get the best of both worlds, so I'm happy.
Very nice.
Yeah, and I'm answering that question. I had no experience of VR previously before this. I did an internship, as you mentioned, and then applied for the graduate scheme that they have at SJP. So I did psychology at university, had no idea what I wanted to do, but knew I loved SAP as a company and wanted to be there. So I actually did 3 different rotations before finding my place in learning and development, which was partner lending, talent, and investment communications. But L&D, whilst I was spending my time in talent, were going through like this transformational change where they were looking at tech. COVID had hit us, so we had to take everything online, and that sparked, as we'll talk later in the podcast, about how we brought tech into learning and development. So since being part of L&D, I've been focused on social learning, tech and innovation, as well as comms and engagement. So I look at utilising social learning platforms and integrating them with our own L&D systems, creating social learning content through podcasts, through video creation. I also involve myself with the creation of our virtual reality and our immersive experiences, as well as writing the strategy for the engagement and comms within L&D. So how do we get our users and our learners utilising the tech that we have on offer? So,
That's
I
great.
want to bookmark that for later in the call for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say the same. We need to dig in a bit more there. It is kind of funny though. I mean, the technology is so new, we all have that moment where we put on the headset and realize, wow, this is real and this is exciting and I want to do something with this. It's going to make an impact in the world. So it's fun, to kind of hear about those shared experiences. So SJP, from our understanding, is one of the first financial services companies to implement VR training. Maybe curious about kind of how VR found its way into SJP and if there was any pushback during that process.
So virtual reality was first introduced into SAP when we were redesigning our academy program. So our academy program, for those that aren't familiar, it's the training kind of school that provides award-winning financial advice training to people that want to be financial advisors, and you can join our academy from a variety of different backgrounds. So we decided on VR because, like with most companies, when COVID hit, we were looking at how we best utilize the transition to virtual learning. So a big part of our original academy program was role plays, and with other trainee advisors that were also on the program. And as part of this, we found that learners would very much partner with their friends, their colleagues, who are also on the kind of the same cohort as themselves. And thus the feedback that they received wasn't always kind of the most objective feedback, and they were quite like nice to one another, which is great. But it's when we're providing training and we want our advisors to be kind of like top notch, it wasn't the most effective in that format. So we started looking at what other means we could bring in, and there was actually a study done by PwC in 2020. So I'll just talk you through that a bit now. But essentially, PwC and other companies already knew that VR was an effective means for teaching hard skills and for job skill simulation, such as flight simulator to train pilots how to fly. And they did an actual study where they looked at 12 US locations. They took the same training, which was addressing inclusive leadership, and they took it in 3 different learning modalities, so classroom, e-learning, and then VR. And the survey found, and the results found, that actually VR, those that learned in the VR setting, had much higher emotional connection to the learning. They also found that it was way quicker to complete the training. Classroom was 2 hours, e-learning was 45 minutes, but VR was 29 minutes. And also they found that over time, the cost of VR actually really evened out, if not went achieved lower, when compared with VR training and when compared classroom training and e-learning. And by all means, I think in the show notes I'll include a link to that study so people can go and read it in more detail. But we just found that perhaps a great way that we could look at virtual reality was implementing it for our role play. So we decided to build our own bespoke role play scenarios where learners could train anywhere, anytime, but in that objective learning environment. So Josh, I don't know if you want to explain a bit more about these role plays that we created.
Yeah, absolutely. So they are sort of financial advisor and client role play experiences. And like Hannah was saying, we delivered this into our academy program. And so essentially we would give them a headset for 12 weeks. So everyone who was going through our academy program, they would all get a headset, and then they would then get the flexibility to then use these role plays as and when they wanted to within within that cohort. So the actual role plays, they were kind of almost like a bit of a foray into gamifying some of our learning content as well, because it was ultimately they would have to choose how to interact with the client on the other side of the table from them, and basically it was almost like a conversation branching narrative where the scenario could go like hundreds of different ways depending on how they approach it, and then you get a score at the end. And I think Hannah was sort of like mentioning about the sort of objectivity and like feedback as well, and how that's a bit of a challenge with face-to-face like actual role playing, I guess I could say. But that we then could almost implement this really consistent way of like measuring people's ability in different areas. So we could, for example, score them on active listening or asking open questions, building rapport, and give them some like feedback on how to improve that next time around. And it also just means it's in a safe space, so they can practice that as many times as they want. They don't feel like they're getting judged by someone across from them when they feel like they've made a couple of silly mistakes. And again, like Hannah was saying, it means that they can go through this relatively quickly and in sort of a short space of time really actually have like an impact on improving their soft skills in these meetings.
And what you're saying, Josh, we've had over 1,000 playthroughs of the role plays. And considering we launched them, would you say like a year ago, just over a year and a half ago? But we have set cohorts that go for the academy at a set time. So it's brilliant that we've had already well over 1,000 run throughs.
It was from the beginning of July. Beginning of July last year, we started capturing all the data for our roleplay experiences, and so we just got over 1,000 a couple of days ago.
Wow. And what have the results been? Has the program been effective? Have you been able to measure that in any ways?
So talk a bit about that. So one of the things that does come across on the data is where we have had sort of repeated playthroughs of the roleplay experiences is actually having an improvements in their score when they go through it. So we measure things like their overall score, but then those breakdowns in like active listening, asking open questions, all of that. And there's a consistent trend that the more that people are playing through this experience, the more they're improving their score in those areas. I think a lot of that comes down to just actually being able to more emotionally connect with the person they're speaking with and understand a bit better, like kind of how to approach a conversation with them when they understand their goals in a bit more detail as well. So it kind of really, like, it showed the sort of a strong benefit in terms of being able to replay through it. But other than that as well, one of the things that we have been measuring is just a bit of evaluative feedback, again, on like the I guess the empathy and really be able to put yourself in the client's perspective. And so we found that quite consistently we were getting very sort of strong positive feedback in specifically that kind of empathy area of the experience, and that's something that we saw as like quite a sharp difference compared to the other digital mediums of content. That was kind of then what led us into our next roleplay experiences, which we're working on now, which is on vulnerability. So working with sort of vulnerable clients, and naturally with that, it's really crucially important to be able to empathize with them very well.
I think it's worth mentioning as well, we recently won an award from Money Marketing, which is a well-established kind of industry, well-established company, we won an award for our award-winning program through the academy, which is what we focus our virtual reality on. So our virtual reality has been recognized across different areas.
I mean, it is really powerful and unique benefit, I think, of VR to be able to practice soft skills over and over again and in a safe place, like you said. And it is funny. Yeah, I mean, our friends are nice to us. They're not objective, right? So getting your feedback. A couple of follow-ups. I do want to dig in a little bit to understand better, when a trainee puts on a headset, exactly what's happening. But so on some of the stats, the improvements in engagement or the improvements in empathy or kind of those soft things you're measuring, it's like, it's super clear to see, okay, people train faster. It costs less money, right? That's very objective. I'm always curious because improving engagement, improving empathy, et cetera, it's very important, but it feels hard to measure. I mean, and I don't even know what the question is there. Just maybe your perspective on how do you guys really quantify some of the softer, more subjective things you're trying to improve, and you're seeing the improvement, but it just sometimes feels soft. So how do you guys quantify that?
Yeah, it is a hard thing to like quantify specifically with soft skills, because like you say, soft skills aren't like almost like a tick box sort of type exercise. It's very much like dependent on the person that you're speaking to and kind of their sort of personal situation, all of this sort of stuff. But I think what we had to do was kind of, when we were creating these role play experiences, kind of, let's say for example, in a financial advisor role play scenario, you are going to be sort of talking to them about different products and services you provide, and it's like, do you lean into that too quickly? Or do you actually take more time to actually kind of just actually have that sort of bit of small talk to start off with and build that level of like trust and openness to kind of allow them to really sort of be really sort of clear and transparent with you about what their goals are. And so we kind of designed the role play experience to be that they would become more withdrawn if you kind of went into those things too early, and focused it on kind of essentially that building of rapport with the client, and then allowing that to then be how you can open up the conversation to a lot of different areas. And essentially that's kind of how we then attach those kind of decisions that you made in the conversation to having a more sort of like understanding of being tactful and being more sort of empathetic and all of that. So it's not a hard and fast response, I guess, to that, but it's something we are sort of exploring a bit more with the empathy vulnerability series that we're working on now, is sort of very specifically kind of having a score for that, and having decisions in the experience that negatively impact that score versus ones that are more sort of like sensitive and I guess like more sort of correct answers. And it'd be interesting. I'm kind of quite keen to see how that role play experience, because we've literally just started developing it a couple of months ago, and it's going to be delivered at the end of this month. So the first thing we'll be doing obviously is trying that out with some focus groups, but on the basis of what we've done with the previous role play experiences, I'm confident we'll get some really sort of positive feedback on specifically the empathy side of things with that.
I think it's also an element of, we do like measure their confidence as well. They like their confidence in being able to go and speak to clients, and that was quite a lot of the feedback we got at the beginning, was when we were kind of more assessing on the preference of role plays versus doing it in virtual reality. A lot of just the generic feedback, and when we were doing some focus groups with them, was that they felt more confident having done it in the virtual reality than in the role plays. So when they go to see a client for the first time when they're leaving the academy, they actually, because they've done it in the headset that almost emulates kind of real life, and they've had that feedback, they felt they were in a better place to be able to go and have those conversations. So I definitely think confidence is something that we'll also continue to measure as to how impactful the virtual reality training has been on that soft skills side, because like you said, that is the hard bit. But essentially, if I felt more confident to go and have a conversation based on the soft skills training I've done, then we can link it back to that.
Right. Yeah, that's huge. Is there a key metric as you all are, presenting findings back to leadership to keep this thing growing? Like, is there a key metric that leadership is most excited about from what you've done so far?
I think really it's from the skills that we're presenting in terms of like the training, how easy is it for then people to then apply those skills in real life. And I know that's one thing. We have a whole sort of data and evaluation team within learning development that does look at the quality and like engagement of all of our content. And it's one of the key things is like, are we presenting learning in a way that they now feel confident to apply it? And if not, then, that's not good. But then what we have noticed with VR is, because it is so similar to kind of how they would be tackling these problems in in their actual day-to-day life, and we put a lot of focus and emphasis on that. It's an easier transition to go from learning to application. And I guess with VR, it's almost like this middle ground where like maybe a lot of digital content before was more like theory based, where you would kind of learn generally what you needed to do, but not necessarily how to do it. But VR is kind of plugging this gap of like being able to practice. So, and that's really where we're focusing for a lot of our VR content.
Yeah.
Brilliant. I want to circle back to something you mentioned, Hannah, in your intro, which was part of your job is trying to figure out how to get your teams and employees to actually adopt these new technologies. What have you seen? Has there been pushback when it comes to VR? Do people not want to put on a headset? Are they skeptical? And what have you been able to do to help people get over that, adoption curve?
Yeah, I mean, because stereotypically we work in the finance company, and that's semi old school. We've changed that now, but certainly when we launched it almost 2-3 years ago, we were still in that position. So it was really hard because some of our partnership have been there since 1992, and they've not seen anything like it. So to go and put a VR headset and say this is the way you're going to train now, we just knew that wasn't going to work. But saying that, we didn't take no as an answer, so we did go quite big bang with it, and we did conferences and attended conferences all across the UK at our different office locations where we had our partnership events, and we were showcasing our VR role plays, and we were encouraging them to come and try it. We were almost like I said, didn't take no for an answer. And as soon as someone puts it on, I think that's where you can understand, for those that haven't tried VR, it is very kind of intuitive. You just kind of naturally know what to do. So we had partners across a variety of different ages that all instantly kind of knew how it worked and understood how to kind of navigate themselves around, and they all loved it. And like that was the thing, is that once the word of mouth started, and we had lots of press about our VR work that was going on, which really helped, really supportive of that, showing that we were kind of leading the way. That when they were talking to each other, a lot of what we do is with engagement, it's that peer led. So if your peers are talking about it, then hopefully then they're going to want to try it because they don't want to miss out. So we did a lot of that at the start, which was really good, and we still do that now. And one thing that we recently done, and Josh, you can explain more about this because it was your idea, was we have virtual reality hubs. So Josh, I don't know if you want to explain to the listeners about that.
That's so nice, because I probably actually wouldn't have said anything about it, but you're right. It was a good idea. So yeah, we wanted to try and make VR more accessible, and I guess the challenge is that not like with any business, we have budget constraints. We have a few hundred headsets that we have that we can use within the business, but when you've got, I don't know, I think total is around 16,500 employees across all of SJP, that it's just naturally you can't give a headset to everyone, and then how do you make sure that this content's always accessible to the people who are interested in engaging with it? And so we just towards the beginning of this year started implementing VR hubs across our different offices. So we now have 3 altogether, a couple in our Cirencester offices, which is our like main sort of
headquarters,
head office. Thank you. And we also have one in Bristol, but we're working on ones in Manchester and in London. So kind of capturing different areas across the UK, so that no matter where our partners are based, and they are dotted all over the UK, the idea is that then they have a hub which will have VR headsets that are charged on a dock, just ready to go. There's a digital screen which is like interactive. They can click through it to understand not just how to use the headset, but also all the different experiences that we offer, and they actually also just help us actually promote some of the wider stuff we do within the division as well. So it's cozy, inviting spaces to just sit down and explore some of our VR content for a bit.
That's brilliant. I think one of the biggest barriers to getting adoption that we hear is the basic one of how do you get somebody actually to put on a headset? And sometimes you have headsets loaded with great content that really could make an impact, but if they're sitting on a shelf collecting dust. So the hubs is what a great way of making it accessible, creating a space that feels inviting that people can come into. Could you share? Have you gotten any feedback from? You've got now thousands of employees and partners that are going through this kind of training. Are you still having to do a lot of poking and pushing and scheduling for people to get into it? Or is there a little bit of word of mouth starting to happen where people come to you and say, hey, I heard this thing was helpful for a partner. I want to get in as well. What have you been hearing?
Definitely word of mouth. I'd say, Josh, you get inundated with kind of requests from people emailing you to set up, coming to their team meetings, for them to go out to their partner practices. We've actually loaned headsets at times, so we'll give it to partner practice or whoever it may be to go and have headsets for a couple of weeks, and then they can do it in their own time. And that's proven really popular. But yeah, I'd say, Josh, you kind of always getting requests.
Yeah, I'd say we also just get the whole spectrum, as like people would expect, like people who just like don't want to go anywhere near it, think it's a gimmick. Why don't we just offer this content as like something they can do on their laptops, and just they're like quite reluctant to go touch it with a barge pole, basically. And then we get people who are like much more advocates for it, that see it or even just hear about it and get really excited and want to be involved in any pilots that we do. And that's really great as well, because I think naturally, like, I don't want to say it, but obviously if people are like really resistant to VR, like, it's I guess the thing to appreciate is that VR isn't for everyone, and it is important that we do offer VR as part of a wider learning offering, which includes more face-to-face learning, more digital learning, sort of peer-to-peer learning. But for people who are interested in it, we do kind of focus on using them with pilots and helping with spreading that word of mouth that Hannah was talking about, just kind of generating a bit of buzz and excitement with some of the partners who are more interested. And then that does seem to then naturally then trickle out, because if, it's this sort of classic fear of missing out. I think that seems to work really well. Some partners having a really good time with VR content, find it really useful. And if they hear it from them rather than hear it from us, they're much more likely to be engaged with it.
I have a basic question that you've talked about this a few different times, but maybe just explain, I guess one, where is the content coming from? Are you creating the content? And then two, when a trainee puts on the headset, exactly, I know it's a role play, but what is happening inside the headset in that experience?
So we do create bespoke content. So I'd say most of what actually everything we're delivering pretty much at the moment is bespoke content that we've created or worked with a developer partner to help us create. So we've got a company called Make Real that we've worked with for a lot of the role play experiences that we've created up to date. We're also working with a consultancy that called 55E5 that have also helped us from an advisory perspective and sort of with managing some of our VR projects. So it's stuff that we have created for specific use cases within the business, but then we have also been like researching other platforms that will allow us to either create our own content quicker or just provide a good sort of off-the-shelf sort of package. So there are some other sort of soft skills, sort of workplace scenario training platforms that we're looking at, and one of them was Body Swaps, and we've been sort of doing that as a bit of a sort of pilot within the business at the moment. And another sort of we're looking at sort of how we can integrate AI into our virtual reality experiences as well. And so there's another couple of platforms that we're looking at that will hopefully then allow us to evolve from maybe the more scripted role play experiences that we offer at the moment to hopefully in the future more sort of like generative sort of AI, and sort of very much having that to and fro sort of conversation with the person sitting across from you. And even from a feedback perspective, being able to like assess how people come across in terms of like their body language, things like if there's like specific things we want them to say out loud in an experience to someone, we can start like hopefully looking to measure that as well. So I've realized I've just gone on the ramble there, but I feel like there is so much opportunity with VR to start looking at how other technologies can complement it. I think it's really exciting, like where it can go and then the impacts that could potentially have as well.
No, I want you to keep talking. I mean, I think you're right. And we're hearing it from all corners that it's this confluence of these different technologies. There's a bit of convergence happening. And I think that the AI simulation, the generative learning, I think that's a unexplored frontier that obviously it's still, there's issues but we're seeing, you mentioned Body Swaps. They're a fantastic developer. Their team is doing really cutting edge stuff using a combination of VR and AI. So I'll be curious to see what conversations you have with them. Well, I want to ask. Well, I really want to ask about AI, but I don't want to go there because this is about VR. But if you want to, you could weave this in an answer. But my question is around just pain points. A lot of companies listening are in various stages of building out a VR program. Some are very early in the process, and you have a well-developed VR program at SJP. I mean, I'm sure you've experienced everything from hardware issues to software, figuring out content. What have you? If you had to look back on the last few years, what have been the major pain points that you've encountered, and maybe any lessons learned? And if you both want to answer briefly, that would be great.
And I don't know if you want to start, and I'll fill in from the technology side of things, maybe.
Yeah, I can definitely start. I think one of the things that was our pain point at the start, and not so much now as we've kind of evolved, was around how we can make it accessible for all. Because accessibility is a massive, and it's really important. And it ties in quite a lot with like the neurodiversity aspect of the people learn in different ways and process information differently. And so we've, at the start, I would say our first role play was not accessible at all. And we got quite a lot of feedback about that people couldn't access it. Virtual reality wasn't for them. The headsets just don't, their brains just don't process it that way. So we have made a desktop version on the back of that. So if people don't want to do virtual reality, we have a desktop. It's still interactive. It still has all those kind of immersive aspects to it, just obviously via the laptop. And then we've also, in our most recent ones, it started including things like subtitles that people can turn on and off. So people can read our 360 films rather than if they can't listen to it in a certain way. And also at a slower speed as well, so people can control their speeds. And we found that we're at a point where we feel we've got a great network of people that we can tap into. So we tap into the neurodiversity group at work. We also, when we have our focus groups, make sure we're asking questions about accessibility, and because we don't know what we don't know, right? So we get this feedback and then we always implement it. And I think we're in a great place now that we weren't at the beginning. So that was one that stuck out for me. I don't know about you, Josh.
Yeah, I think totally. Would agree with Hannah on a lot of those challenges, and I think the technology was always a bit of a challenge, like starting off with as well. But then also just like some of the just issues that you have with trying to get maybe 20 people in the room to all put on a headset at the same time, and kind of what kind of issues come up. And it is a bit like whack-a-mole, you're just kind of like trying to sort them all out as they come up. But then I guess, again, naturally, it's a new technology. We're kind of like identifying what those challenges are, and it meant that then we could start introducing that into any sort of lesson plans or delivery plans around it, so we could be a bit more proactive, know what issues do sometimes come up, and have the almost like where we're trying to get people who are outside of our division more familiar and more becoming experts in VR, so that then if there's people within their teams that are struggling, then they can support rather than us always having to be the ones that kind of like come in. And then naturally that's based on maybe limitations of us like actually being available to help. So it just means that they get more immediate sort of support and have a better experience overall.
Really interesting. Both of those answers are great. I'm curious, when it comes to some of the logistical challenges, once you started hitting a certain scale, what solutions have you found? Obviously you guys are using Arbor, so that's a part of it. But even beyond that, what does your content pipeline look like? I know you're regularly updating, providing new training modules, and you have now devices in multiple locations. So could you just share a little bit about, for companies that are looking to go from that first pilot project, which is relatively easy to manage, to some kind of scale, what have you found is what's working for you?
Okay. I think about the initial, I think when you're piloting it out, and it's at a smaller scale, it's probably much easier from a logistical perspective. And this is what we found, to run sessions where you will bring everyone in the room to experience the headsets and the role play. Could be in the same room, they could be in different rooms, but like however you want to set it up, but ultimately making it almost like a course or an event that they kind of like then book onto, and you hold it all within one room. Because one of the challenges that we've definitely had with our academy program, where we're sending headsets to delegates for them to just use in their own time, we have had challenges in getting those headsets back. We get them back, but then ultimately we have, let's say 100 headsets out with different cohorts across the academy. While vast majority of them do come back, suddenly it then becomes a bit of a trying to chase the last few down, and that can obviously take a bit of time and a bit of resource. So I think that's also another reason why stuff like the VR hubs is probably a really good idea, because you can actually set up a little space within different offices that's relatively inexpensive, that then allows people to actually come and engage with it and use it, and then you're not having to worry about the continual sort of logistics. So I think that's something we do want to broach and do much more of, and get much more of these hubs set up, because we could then get to a point where we're not having to send headsets out to partners for them to use. They can just pop into an office that's like not too far from them.
Yeah, that's great. That's great feedback. As we kind of move towards a wrap here, Josh, one of the things you said earlier was that, and I think this is really important, that VR training it's part of a broader landscape of training. I think you said, Josh, maybe it was you, Hannah. I think that's important. VR isn't for everyone. And even when it's maybe in its best form, it's not the only way to train. So curious, you've had a lot of success. The hub sounds like a great next step. But where do you see this going over the next 3 to 5 years at SJP? Kind of what's your dream of what VR could become?
Hannah, you say your dream first, and we'll see how aligned our dreams are.
Oh, I think it's linking back in with that AI stuff. I mean, who knows where tech's going to be in the next 10 to 15 years, goodness me. But I would say as we evolve, and I was starting to look at bringing AI into a lot of our training, not just our virtual reality kind of experiences, I'm really intrigued to see where that goes, because that provides that personalized learning journey. And that for me is the interesting part, because like I said, everyone learns differently, and someone's experience is like, I think it's best when it's not the same as someone else's. And therefore when AI we're not scripting anything, we're not directing someone down a certain route, then that's how people are going to learn, isn't it? The AI with the feedback there. I think also with like reading body language as well, so it becomes much more humanized. I think at the moment we don't have that aspect of our virtual reality training, but I would love to see that aspect coming in, especially because the nature of our business is face-to-face financial advice. So if we have a way that provides that training that looks at like the human aspects, so our facial expressions, our body language, and can provide feedback in that way, then that will be really exciting, because that will be when advisors can apply that in real life when they are giving the face-to-face financial advice. So for me, those are my kind of two, I'd say. What about you, Josh?
Yeah, I'd say, a couple of things. One of them is based on like this rule that we've got at the moment with any VR content that we're creating, is that we're also making it available in some sort of form on a different platform, whether it's desktop or like mobile, let's say. And that goes back to that sort of really important kind of aspect of making sure it's accessible to everyone. But in terms of what I'm excited about for the future, I've just been playing around with the Quest 3 headset, Meta Quest 3.
Nice.
And yes, again, one of the best parts of my job is just ordering in the latest toys and having a mess around. But
tough job.
It's a tough job. The mixed reality aspect of it, I think, is so interesting. So it's something I kind of maybe got a little bit excited about before, but once trying the headset and actually putting it on, is this whole idea of like, you're not being completely disconnected from reality. You're kind of having your real life enhanced with digital elements that are coming through in the headset. And I like the idea of us trying to create different experiences that actually involve like maybe you speaking with someone, but like they're right there in front of you in the room, and almost like having this connection between different headsets as well, so that if you've got multiple people in the room all wearing headsets, that then you can actually see them all physically in like real life, rather than them being kind of like disconnected from you because you're all in like your own isolated world. So I think the connectivity between people and the more sort of like social element of learning will be a really exciting step that some of this mixed reality experiences will take.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree. Kind of similar for me. I'd gotten excited about mixed reality in the past, and just kind of that's been I guess reignited.
It hasn't
some
been
of the
good
new
enough
technology.
to really be impactful.
Right. Yeah. There's so much now. Well, this has been great.
Well, that's a good point, actually. What are you guys most excited for?
Oh yeah. Oh man, that's a good question. I think the thing that I say often is, for me, what's just exciting overall about VR is it feels like, it really is changing the way people learn. That's the way I think about it. So whether it's training in, an enterprise or corporate setting, or it's learning in a classroom, it's really just learning. And I think the speed at which people learn, the amount of information that they're able to retain, but then even the accessibility, I think, is a point that doesn't get hit on enough. Being able to bring these really high quality training experiences to students in places where they wouldn't have access, previously, or even to new hires or employees getting access ahead of time, and they come in ready to roll. I think, to me, all that's really, really exciting. And I think there's honestly kind of a bigger thing that we're all a part of here, which is helping change the way people learn in a very significant way. And so I think seeing that play out over the next 5 to 10 years and see how it permeates. We're seeing it's totally industry agnostic. The growth that we're seeing every type of company from all over the world moving training into VR, and it's not industry specific. It's totally agnostic. And so I think for me, that's what's most exciting, is just to see this massive transformation in how people learn.
Yeah, I love the forward thinking. I love looking at. I'm always trying out any new. Google recently just released their generative search engine, generative image capabilities, where you can ask it to create something just like Dolly or Midjourney. So I'm always interested in that kind of thing. But honestly, my answer would just be, we've been doing it for 6 years, and I'm excited that it's finally becoming a reality. To sit down with a company like SJP and to hear that you're using it broadly and that employees are actually enjoying it and using it. I think for a number of years, we were still asking ourselves, is this actually going to happen? Or is this a pipe dream? Or is this technology even relevant? And I think it took some time. I think that there's plenty of people using it for gaming. That's great. That's fun. But to me, it's the learning applications, and it's doing things. We always say that VR is great. This is a Dr. Jeremy Bailenson from Stanford quote, but VR is great for doing things that are difficult, dangerous, or expensive to simulate in real life. And the example you gave about being able to simulate a difficult conversation that might be embarrassing and where you might make a mistake in real life, and being able to do it 5 or 10 times without judgment, and then really feeling like you're confident, and then you go in and you're in that actual situation in real life, and you feel like, wow, I've already done this. So to me, that what you just shared was what gets me excited, that we're seeing that across the board. Nurses training, doctors preparing for surgeries, lots of soft skill applications, not just hard skill, lots of soft skill applications. So I think the real world applications, after 6 years of feeling like, at home at Christmas, my parents asking, is VR really going to be a thing? Stories like SJP give me some ammunition to be able to answer that now. So,
hey, I got to say, it's been 7 years. I have to correct, because VR years are dog years. So that's it's like another 7 years adding that extra year. But yeah, so you all are training financial advisors at scale. Amazing. And then yesterday we interviewed a group that's using VR to train astronauts, right? So it's like, it's permeating everything, right? It's just so awesome. But this has been great. We got to wrap. I know we're at time for everybody, and we really appreciate you guys. I know you're busy and the time change and everything. One thing, you have your own podcast, Journey to the Metaverse. Where can our listeners find that if they want to check that out?
Yeah, it's on Spotify. So if you just type in Everyday School Day into the search bar, you'll find it under St. James's Place. And just one quick thing on that. If you watch our episode 4, it's actually done in VR. So it's a broadcast.
Ah, cool.
And a podcast, it's a broadcast.
We'll put that in the show notes for sure.
Yeah, and we actually go into virtual reality. But there's a 4-part series which takes you on a journey to the metaverse, is what we called it.
Love it. I love
And
it.
actually, talking about the AI, we just recorded a podcast yesterday around how our brains learn and how AI can help and not help with that. So that episode will be coming soon. So make sure you like and subscribe.
Love it. Awesome.
Love
Amazing.
that plug.
Well, thank you guys. This
yeah,
has been great.
That was strong.
Thank you so much for having
Okay.
me.
Thanks,
Yep.
everybody.
Talk soon.
It was a great interview.
Yeah, it's actually been a lot of fun to do the interviews with two people. I think we get kind of different perspectives, different energy. And once again, a major financial services institution, top 100 in London,
FTSE 100.
is taking VR training.
That's a new.
Yeah, the FTSE 100. New term for us. But it's exciting to see companies of that size taking VR training so seriously. And
legit.
obviously they have big plans. Yeah, very legit. Well, as always, we appreciate you spending a little time with us. Make sure you check us out wherever you find your podcasts, and we'll see you next time.